Children, now we will move on to the next type of exchange rate, that is flexible exchange rate system. In the beginning itself I told you there are three types of exchange rate system. They are fixed exchange rate system, flexible exchange rate system and managed floating. So we finished with fixed exchange rate system, its merits, demerits and features. Now we will move on to the next one, flexible exchange rate system. So from the name itself it is very clear to you, it is flexible, always it is changing. Now let us see the definition of the flexible exchange rate system. It refers to a system in which exchange rates are determined by the forces of demand and supply of foreign exchange. The concept of demand and supply you can remember very well. The two concepts of demand and supply you have already learned in class 11 in microeconomics. So you can just recollect the concept of demand and supply which you have learned in the previous year. So the definition of flexible exchange rate is, it is a exchange rate system which always changes according to the demand and supply forces. Exchange rate means the price of the foreign exchange, right? The rate at which one currency is exchanged for the other, that means the prices of currencies. What you have learned in class 11 you can recollect, the demand and supply and its influence on the price. So that will be applicable here. So you can just recollect the concept of demand and supply what you have learned. So here the foreign exchange rate means the price of foreign exchange definitely, and the two concepts demand and supply. So in a flexible exchange rate system, the exchange rate will be changing according to the demand of the foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange. Demand for foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange. So according to these two, demand for foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange factors, the exchange rate will keep on changing. Now regarding the demand and supply of foreign exchange, that will be our next topic after the third rate of foreign exchange. You will be learning in detail regarding the demand for foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange. For the time being, you just need to know the concept of demand and supply of foreign exchange in the definition. So, in the market, according to the demand of the foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange, the price of the foreign exchange or the foreign exchange rate keep on changing. That kind of a system is known as flexible exchange rate system. That is prevalent now. Okay, so we will move on to the next one, the characteristics of flexible exchange rate system. Now the first characteristics of flexible exchange rate system is the value of the exchange rate or currency fluctuates. The exchange rate will always keep on fluctuating. It is not fixed by a government. It keeps on fluctuating because demand for foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange is determining the exchange rate in the market. Therefore, it always keeps on changing, fluctuates. Next one, there is no government intervention. In the fixed exchange rate system, you can find government is the only body which is fixing the exchange rate. But here, there is no such government intervention. It is decided by the forces of demand for foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange in the market. It is also known as floating exchange rate. So keep that in mind. The flexible exchange rate system is also known as floating exchange rate system. Next is thousands of banks, firms and other financial institutions are involved in buying and selling of foreign exchange. I told you in the foreign exchange market, this flexible exchange rate system is determined by the forces of demand and supply. The people who demand and people who supply, buying and selling process. Who all are the buyers and who all are the sellers? Authorized dealers are there for buying and selling of foreign exchange. And you all know who all are the authorized dealers. In the last chapter I have explained. In the previous topics I have explained. Who are the authorized dealers? RBI of all the countries, government of all the countries, financial institutions, investors, they all are the authorized dealers. So, in a flexible exchange market, as the exchange rate is determined by the demand and supply of foreign exchange or buying and selling of foreign exchange, we can find lot of authorized dealers there, such as banks, firms and other financial institutions who are always involved in the buying and selling process of foreign exchange. So that is the peculiarity of the flexible exchange rate system. Now we will move on to the next topic, merits of flexible exchange rate system. The merits of flexible exchange rate system. So I hope the features of flexible exchange rate system is very clear to you. No government intervention, exchange rate always fluctuates, decided by the forces of demand and supply, and you can find lot of parties involved there such as banks, government, commercial banks, reserve banks of all the countries, financial institutions, etc. Now we will move on to the merits of flexible exchange rate system. The first merit is no need of huge foreign exchange reserves for the government. Now, previously in the fixed exchange rate system, the government is managing the exchange rate. It is fixing the exchange rate. So, government should have the responsibility to maintain huge reserves of foreign exchange. But here, the government does not have the responsibility of maintaining huge reserves, because it is automatically happened by the forces of demand and supply of foreign exchange. So there is no, government doesn't have the responsibility to maintain a huge reserves. Government will maintain some reserve, but as a sole responsibility will not be there, because it is decided by the forces of demand and supply in the market. So government, RBI, all of them will be purchasing and selling according to the situation prevailing in the market. Now the next merit of the flexible exchange rate system is it maintains equilibrium and removes any disequilibrium in the balance of payment. Because the correction is done by the forces of demand and supply. Now, we have already learned any change in the market, in the exchange rate, that will be automatically brought back to the equilibrium stage with the help of demand and supply. You have learned the similar concepts in microeconomics also. Now, the forces of demand and supply can bring back the equilibrium state if there is any disequilibrium. Disequilibrium means what? If there is anything which is removed from the equilibrium state, it is known as disequilibrium. It can be brought back with the help of forces of demand and supply. Likewise, it maintains equilibrium. That means if there is any disequilibrium in the balance of payment, if there is a deficit in the balance of payment, if there is a surplus in the balance of payment, just as we told when I explained about the fixed exchange rate system, that was the main problem of fixed exchange rate system. And I explained to you, if the government is fixing the exchange rate below the market level or above the market level, what happens? There will be either surplus or deficit in the balance of payment. Such situation will not be there here, because it is not fixed. It always keeps on fluctuating. Therefore, if it is a surplus or if there is a deficit, automatically that surplus and deficit situation will be cleared, and it will be going back to the equilibrium stage, because we know that deficit and the surplus cannot last for a long period. It cannot exist for a long period. So such kind of disequilibrium cannot exist for a long period. It has to be corrected. So that will be corrected, and the equilibrium will be maintained in the economy automatically through the forces of demand and supply. That is the most important feature of the flexible exchange rate system. So I read out the point once again for you. It maintains equilibrium means it removes any disequilibrium in the balance of payment, because the correction is done by the forces of demand and supply of foreign exchange. Now we will move on to the demerits of flexible exchange rate system. So I hope the merits are clear to you. The merits of flexible exchange rate system: no need of huge exchange reserves. Second point is maintains equilibrium. Now all the you can just make a comparative study of the flexible exchange rate system and fixed exchange rate system. So by making a comparative study you will be able to know the difference. Now next we will move on to the demerits of the flexible exchange rate system. Now what all things I have written for merits of flexible exchange rate system that act as a demerit of fixed exchange rate system. So just interchange it, you can find out. So it will be very easy for you to learn if you learn in that way. That is why I told you to compare and learn fixed and flexible exchange rate system. Now we will move on to the demerits of the flexible exchange rate system. The first demerit is it creates instability in the foreign exchange market. What is this instability in the foreign exchange market? Instability, that means exchange rate is always fluctuating. Therefore, there is no idea for the investors. It will not give confidence to the people. Everywhere it is changing. Ups and downs can happen because the exchange rate is fluctuating. That is why it is known as it creates instability in the foreign exchange market, because the external value of domestic currency keeps on changing as per the demand and supply of foreign exchange. Domestic currency's value will always keeps on changing due to the forces of demand and supply. But in the fixed exchange rate, it is fixed for a particular period of time. So there is no need of any worry. So here the fluctuations can take place according to the demand and supply. So it is a bit problem, isn't it? So it creates instability in the foreign exchange market. Therefore, external value of domestic currency keeps on changing as per the demand and supply of foreign exchange. So as a result, what happens in the market? Uncertainty in the market. We can't predict when there is a rise or fall. In the fixed exchange, we can predict it will be kept fixed for a particular period of time. But here, we cannot predict. Therefore, it creates uncertainty in the market, whether it is profitable to invest. So a lot of confusion can arrive here. So the intelligent players, they will get benefit. So lots of confusion takes place here. So it creates uncertainty in the market. So as there is uncertainty in the market, it can hamper what? Foreign trade as well as foreign investment. It can kill the smooth flow of foreign trade and foreign investment because everybody is confused. So it can kill the free flow of foreign trade and foreign investment. Now we will move on to the next demerits. Speculative activities. It encourages speculative activities. In the fixed exchange rate system, there was no speculative activity. But here there is speculative activity. You know what is speculative activity? Buying or investing in the share markets or in the real estate with an expectation that we can earn in the future. So here in this flexible exchange rate system, such kind of speculative activities are more with an expectation that more can be earned. So it encourages speculative activities. Speculators manipulate the market and make the exchange rates too high and too low. If the exchange rates are favorable, more will be purchased. More investments will be done in the economy. So ultimately, there will be fluctuations in the exchange rate as very low as well as very high. So when there is a profitable time for the investors, lots of investments and purchasing of the foreign exchange takes place simultaneously in the market. So the simultaneous purchasing or selling of the foreign exchange can create wide fluctuations in the market. It can make the foreign exchange market, its value to be too high or too low sometimes. Therefore, that kind of speculations can create the exchange rates to be too high or too low. If it is too high or too low, what happens? This discourages the foreign trade and foreign investment. So this time the investors will be, this particular time when there is a when the exchange rate is very high or when the exchange rate is very low. So some kind of confusion exists in the market. So majority of the investors, they will be keeping away themselves in the purchase of the foreign exchange when the value is too low. When the value is very high, more will be purchased. So at that time what will happen? More and more fluctuations can happen in the economy. So that fluctuations will be explained when the demand and supply of foreign exchange is dealt with. So this discourages the foreign trade and foreign investment. But in the fixed exchange rate, everybody is comfortable. For a particular period of time, there won't be any change in the exchange rate system. Therefore, such kind of speculations will not be there. Exchange rate will be fixed. There will be free flow of trade. But here, as the fluctuations are happening at a very higher rate and at a very low rate. So at a particular time when if it is favorable for the investors, if they are investing and if it is profitable for them, soon the market is undergoing a kind of depression. What happens? It will be a loss for them. So they are not able to predict what happens. So in this situation, as the exchange rates varies at a higher rate, if it is go too high or too low, such kind of confusion can arise, and this can discourage, it is a possibility of discouraging the foreign trade and foreign investments. Now we will move on to the next one. It creates inflationary situation. What do you mean by that? When the prices of imports are very high, as in the case of India, if the price of imports are very high, the goods that we are buying from outside or abroad, if it is very high, what will happen? It means price of that particular import will be high in the economy. If the price rises, it means what? There is a problem of inflation, because we have learned inflation as a rise in the price. Therefore, if the rise in the price of imports can happen, more we have to pay for them. If more we have to pay for them, it means at more price we will be selling that import in our country. So there will be inflation. So it can create inflationary pressure in the economy. So these are the demerits of flexible exchange rate system. They are, it creates instability in the foreign exchange market. It can promote speculative activities, and finally it can create inflationary situation in the economy. Now we are moving on to the third form of foreign exchange. Now we will see the difference between the fixed exchange rate and flexible exchange rate in a nutshell. I have given a box for you. Normally in economics we write the difference with the help of a box where we write the basis and where we try to differentiate both the flexible and fixed exchange rate. Now on the basis of determination of exchange rate, let us differentiate fixed exchange rate and flexible exchange rate. Who is determining the exchange rate in the fixed exchange rate system? Definitely it is determined by the government. Now who is determining the exchange rate in a flexible exchange rate system? Demand and supply. So on the basis of determination, we have differentiated both flexible and fixed exchange rate system. Now on the basis of power of control, who has the power to control fixed exchange rate system? Only the government. Who has the power to control the flexible exchange rate system? It is done automatically by the demand and supply forces, and it always fluctuates. Now on the basis of nature, what is its nature? Fixed exchange rate is always stable in the nature, it is fixed. But whereas flexible exchange rate will always keep on changing. So this is how we have differentiated both flexible and fixed exchange rate in a nutshell. Okay. Now we will move on to the next form of the foreign exchange rate. Mainly there are three: fixed exchange rate, flexible exchange rate and managed floating. The third one is managed floating. Now what is this managed floating? It is a system in which the foreign exchange rate is determined by the market forces. Which are the market forces? Demand and supply, and also by the central bank. Central bank influences the exchange rate through intervention in the foreign exchange market. So, it is a system where the foreign exchange is determined by the forces of demand and supply, as we told in the flexible exchange rate system, and also by central bank. Central bank will buy and sell the foreign exchange and thus maintains the foreign exchange rate. So, here there is the influence of two forces, one is demand and supply and the other one central bank. Okay. So, we can write down the features of the managed floating. So, here this is a system which combines both demand and supply as well as central bank. Therefore, we can say this is a hybrid system of fixed and flexible exchange rate system. So, government, central bank as well as the forces of demand and supply, both are involved in it. So, central bank is also involved in it. Definitely the central bank will be influenced by the government of each and every country. So, that is why it is known as a hybrid system between flexible and fixed exchange rate system. Now, we will move on to the second characteristics. Central bank will intervene in the foreign exchange reserve to restrict the fluctuations in the foreign exchange market. So, here the central bank will intervene even though forces of demand and supply is working out. Central bank of the country will also intervene in the foreign exchange market to influence the foreign exchange rate through purchase and selling of foreign exchange. Now, next is central bank maintains a reserve of foreign exchange. Here in this system, the central bank will maintain a reserve of the foreign exchange. How? By selling and buying the foreign exchange reserves. It is also known as dirty floating. There is nothing special in that name. It is also known as dirty floating. So, these are the characteristics. It is a hybrid system between both the exchange rates, fixed and flexible. Then the central bank will intervene in the foreign exchange market by purchasing and selling the foreign exchanges and will influence the fluctuation happening in the foreign exchange market. Then central bank maintains a reserve of foreign exchange, like government in the fixed. You have learned, likewise central bank of a country will maintain a reserve because it has to buy and sell the foreign exchange. Therefore, it has to maintain a reserve of foreign exchange, definitely. Then comes, it is also known as the dirty floating. So, these are the features of managed floating. Now, in the next video, you will learn about the example for managed floating.